Hello, hello. I am back to recap the final two episodes of the Copenhagen Test, episode 7 and episode 8. And episode 7 was quite a doozy. Literally non-stop action from beginning till end. So if anyone was missing action from this show, you got a lot of it in episode 7. I want to start by also saying that every time I'm given a review and asked a question like, oh, why can't we get more backstory with Viktor? Oh, why is Parker acting the way she is all of a sudden? The show answers my question usually within the next episode or two. Episode started with a flashback to Parker and her wanting to even quit the job before she got a promotion, which I think brought a lot of clarity to how much she is now digging her new part of the job, actually being respected at the orphanage. And I think that brought a little more clearness to her character. And then episode 7, after that opening with the flashback, we get Michelle taking orders to kill Alexander Hale, and they get into this big fight. Michelle stabs him in the abdomen to start the episode, which leads to a big fight. Alexander doesn't want to hurt Michelle. He's trying to tell Michelle she doesn't have to do this, but they keep fighting, and Alexander eventually knocks her out and leaves, but obviously damage has already been done to him because he was stabbed in the abdomen. Then the rest of that episode is just Alexander trying to stay alive because the orphanage, his supposed allies and team, have turned on him because they think he turned on them. And even though he already has to deal with that and more teams coming to kill him, he also has to deal with the tech in his brain starting to mess up more and more, which is hurting him more and more. Parker and the team see that happening. They are worried about his condition. Parker puts it together that he's probably going to try and visit his ex-wife, or I guess hide with his ex-wife, which is exactly what ends up happening. Well, first he went to their old place and had memories of he and his wife from the past, remembering when they spent time at a cabin. That's when another assassin team tried to take him out. Alexander is bleeding out, thinking he only has a couple hours left to live. He's calling Viktor for help. Viktor is encouraging him to find a way to stay alive until he and Viktor can come together again. Eventually, Alexander did make it to the cabin, Rachel's cabin, his ex-wife, and he begs her to tell him about the pills and the truth about the pills. Rachel is acting confused. She has no idea that the pills are the thing that caused the hack to happen in his brain, or that's at least what she's saying. Ends up being, I guess, one of the big reveals here towards the end of the season, and that's kind of my only problem with these last two episodes, is the big reveals and the big twists are pretty underwhelming to me. We learned that his ex-wife Rachel did know that the pills were going to hack him and was a part of the plan. She eventually admits that it was her plan from her own different spy organization since before they even got married. She does try to say, well, it wasn't all an act. It's trying to play up that there was some part of their marriage that was still real, but it was mostly this plan to, I guess, deceive Alexander and obviously end up helping him be hacked. It's just not this big ass emotional reveal or this big ass shocking reveal. It's just either Rachel knew about the pills or she didn't. And I feel like some people are upset with this show because it relies too much on twists. And I don't know if that's necessarily true. I like that they have twists and turns. It's just the last two big twists of the season were underwhelming to me, and that was one of them. While Alexander is being hunted down, Maura and Marlo are having disagreements about St. George because Marlo feels like Maura is being too loyal to St. George when St. George might have done something to cause this whole plan to happen, with Schiff wanting to hack Alexander and all of that. I like that we have problems within the team here in these last two episodes, and it's not just everyone against Alexander. There are people within the team that are slowly but surely trying to fight against what is happening to Alexander, that he's being followed and watched and hunted down, all because he was hacked, and all because he just wants information from the hacker Schiff as to why this is happening to him. Mora does end up telling Marlowe that he feels indebted to St. George because she rescued him from himself, and St. George is the person that put this whole program together. And as far as I read it, it was from some of the scenes in the next episode, episode 8, the finale. St. George and her wife really kind of built the orphanage from the ground up together. That's why her ex-wife was, I guess, significant in the flashbacks, even though she now has dementia and doesn't always remember these things. The show did a good enough job giving us the backstory on all of these many different characters and trying to keep the show character driven despite also adding a whole lot of plots. I think why the show is getting mediocre reviews is because they did, and I've said this before in one of my other reviews, they are trying to do a little too much in just 8 episodes. But I must say, episode 7 was definitely one of the best episodes of the season. I would say episode 3, 6, and 7 are like the good episodes of this first season of the show. The big twist in the end, or well, never mind, not the big twist, but one of the other twists in the end is that when Michelle told Parker that she told Alexander that his house was bugged, Parker did set up a big scheme to now try and help him out. And they set up a scheme where Schiff will be brought to St. George, but it won't be the real St. George. And Schiff won't realize that because he's never actually met St. George. In fact, so many people, even within the orphanage organization, have not met St. George. It was a good throwback to their history together in Germany when Schiff was supposed to be meeting St. George before the Berlin Wall came down, and that's why he was then arrested by Germany officials for being a traitor and tortured, and that's why he wants revenge on her in the first place. So I like the scene when Schiff thinks he's finally meeting St. George and his whole big old plan to take out St. George, even though he's being tricked because he don't know who the real St. George is anyway. He realizes it by the end of those scenes, but it's too late at that point, and Schiff is taken out. So that was a mission well done from Parker. However, Schiff put out the orders to kill Hale and Hale's parents. Alexander had his parents with Viktor, because he thinks Viktor is his BFF and his mentor, and they are together, and Hale ends up being attacked by Schiff's men on his way to the restaurant, Viktor's restaurant. He does manage to bypass the attackers, but then he starts having another seizure from his bleeding and his chip malfunctioning, and it's all looking pretty rough for Alexander Hale, which I forgot to mention. One of the things that has been helping Alexander stay alive is because of his ex-wife, Rachel, had given him adrenaline doses during their confrontation where he learned the truth about him. So he had been taking those throughout this episode to keep going and not falling apart and not dying. But at the end of episode 7, he loses his grip on the adrenaline dose that Rachel gave him, and he falls to the ground, and someone is walking towards him, and that is how episode 7 ends, with another cliffhanger. The show also does a good job of cliffhangers, which I guess in this day and age of streaming, you kind of have to do that, I guess. And then episode 8 is kind of our episode that is supposed to tie the whole season together and hopefully clear up loose ends, while also giving us plots for a potential season 2 if the show gets picked up for a season 2. I don't know. Episode 8 began kind of giving us more backstory on Rachel. which is something I needed because, like I said, I did find that twist in season 7 that she's been in on this from the beginning as kind of underwhelming because we don't really know Rachel. Out of all the characters on the show, and there's a lot of them, Rachel is one of the characters up to the finale that we got the least of. But I guess at least they tried to give her some background on season 8. She was determined to complete her mission, talking to the person she was getting the drugs from. It all really felt like whatever spy organization that Rachel was working for is an organization that likes to blackmail each other. And that's kind of what was happening to Rachel as she went on her mission to deceive Alexander and eventually give him these pills. This is the episode that also explained that Parker has been on this plot to actually save Hale and that Michelle is now in on it too. And then we get back to the scene that was the cliffhanger for episode 7, where the person that was walking towards Hale was actually Cobb, and Cobb helps him administer the adrenaline, and they go to the restaurant, Viktor's restaurant. Michelle is there as well. They all are fighting these assassins that were sent by Schiff before he died to take out Hale and his parents. But Hale and Michelle and Cobb are successful in saving his parents' life. But after saving his parents, Hale faints. He's brought to the orphanage, and they work on his brain. They try and help the electrical process in his brain, which eventually helps him regain consciousness. And it seems like Alexander Hale will be alive for now. Mora gives Hale the chance to walk away from the orphanage, but Hale chooses to stay. They end up giving him a watch that will help him switch off the broadcast in his brain when he wants to. And then he later thanks Parker for saving his life, but he doesn't get to see Parker in that conversation, even though she can see him, which is how this entire season has been. Parker is kind of becoming another St. George, which is a good tie-in to those two characters towards the beginning of the season when St. George gave her the book to write in to try and bury all of her bad feelings going on while doing these missions. And it's a nice full circle moment when Hale and Parker have that conversation, but he can't see her still, which I think he wanted it that way too, because that's kind of how this mission had been the entire time. But I'm glad they have never seen each other, and I kind of hope they keep it that way. But it's also this very interesting dynamic that Parker knows so much about him. Her entire mission has been to read him and find out all about his personality and what he may or may not do and what he may or may not like. And yet he's never met her. So that was a nice touch. I'm glad they ended the show with those two still never seeing each other. Parker ends up being promoted thanks to this successful mission, and she uses her new powers to wipe Michelle's slate clean so that Michelle doesn't have to worry about her life for the organization. She also offered Michelle a new gig, which Michelle accepted. Michelle and Alexander later say their goodbyes as Michelle is going on a new mission. Their relationship was never really doing it for me, to be honest. I cover a lot of shows on this show, and I always need chemistry for my couples. And I don't really think Michelle and Alexander Hale had chemistry, but they still had a nice dynamic of trying to deceive each other. And I really do like both characters. In fact, I like a lot of characters on this show. I like Parker. I like Mora. Cobb took a while to grow on me, but he's been a by-the-book guy this entire time. They did a good job with his story arc as well. So his character arc. The character arcs are character arcing. But then we get to our big twist in the final episode, is that Viktor is the one behind all of this, actually. It was not just Schiff. That is our shocking twist. Viktor was the one behind the biohack into Alexander, and Hale confronts Viktor, who has to reveal an even bigger secret, that Viktor has been working on this Cassandra project for years, and he is part of a group that believes in biohacking. He lets Hale know that Hale is not the only one on their roster. They have agents all over the world. There is even an agent keeping their eye on Michelle. So it seems like Viktor has built, or at least been a part of this organization or project that is building, I guess, an army in a way to go up against the orphanage. And I think that is our setup for season 2 if they get a season 2. Viktor being behind this was just underwhelming to me as well, I fear, because I also feel like they kept Viktor as a really big background character, but also gave us a lot of hints along the way that he was working with Schiff. They had those conversations back in the day. It seems as though maybe Schiff didn't even know that Viktor was a part of the operation, because that seems to be how these spies do it. They don't want their cover blown ever, and that makes for a more interesting show. The show does a really good job of bringing that spy drama where there's all these secrets going on, who's really aligned with who can trust who. That's something the show does really well. And spy dramas are not my genre necessarily, but from what I saw from this one, I liked it. My biggest problem, I guess, with these final 2 episodes were the 2 big twists being underwhelming to me personally. But as a whole, the show was a good watch. I don't know if I would give it a B necessarily. I'd probably score it somewhere like a 78. I feel like it's a show that people who like the genre are gonna like it, and there are people that are gonna find the beginning boring or confusing and probably not like it overall. I land somewhere in the middle, and I'm a tough critic, so a 78 grade for me is actually pretty good, because most shows won't get over a 70 from me, or I will stop watching a show midway through the season because it's just not working for me. But I stuck through this one, and I never really wanted to stop it. It's an easy watch, even though it can get a little complicated because they tried a little too many plots. If they do get a season 2, which I hope they do, I hope they don't try to do as much. If you want to keep it character driven and you only have 8 episodes, unfortunately, not every character can have several different plots, which is what I kind of feel like happened in the first season. So they need to... Some people are complaining about the pace, or that it was too slow or repetitive. I don't agree with that. I think the only problem was that there's so many different characters and they only have 8 episodes. And that's part of the reason why the 2 big twists at the end were kind of underwhelming to me, because the setup time to make it more of a bigger shocker wasn't really there. But I do recommend it overall if you are looking for something to watch, although I assume that if you have made it to this final video of me reviewing the show, you've probably watched all the way through the season 2, or you're just keeping up with my reviews possibly. But yeah, it's a 78 show to me, a solid C+, which for me is good. Because if you watch some of my other critiques of other shows, I can be a whole lot harsher.